Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Before I explain exactly what we're going to do today, I am going to combine this water with some yeast because this water has to be a specific temperature and I don't want to talk so long that it goes down. So where it gets too cool. So combining water and yeast. This water is at between 105 and 115 degrees. So now we let this sit for 10 minutes. So now I can talk to you. All right. Today we are working from the Deep Run Roots cookbook right here, and we are making sweet potato onion bread. And so this is, as you can see, this takes up 2 full page spreads. So this is going to be interesting. We had a bunch of sweet potatoes and it's getting warmer here. We had them in the, oh, actually I need to mark my 10 minutes now, right? Okay. They were sitting in the garage and it's getting warmer. So they were about to start to go bad because, you know, it likes cooler temperatures. So we decided we were just going to roast them all the ones that we had left, like she does in the book, just roast them in their jackets. And then we took them out, we peeled them and pureed them. And then we put them in the freezer in freezer bags. So we're going to be using some of those for this recipe. That's why we chose to make this recipe. It's a yeast bread, but this is all of the yeast that's in it. And this is a starter. So we're gonna let this sit, once we combine everything, we're gonna let this sit overnight before, on the counter at room temperature before we assemble the bread tomorrow. So I'll be back in 9 minutes. My yeast has been in the water for 10 minutes and it is time to mix that with bread flour. So I've pre-measured the bread flour, and so I'm going to stir this up a little bit just to make sure that the yeast is all mixed in still, because we are going to use some of this but not all of it, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's what the recipe says. So pouring it over the measuring cup so I don't spill it. I maybe have learned something, maybe. All right, so we're going to put this in the bowl with the pre-measured bread flour, and we are going to whisk it. And she says this makes a very sticky starter. And at this point, it does not look like a starter at all. It looks like there's not enough liquid. I don't feel like this is right. Like I can't even get all of this mixed in, and now it's all over my hand. So maybe I haven't learned anything. Okay, I feel like we need more of this water here. So I'm gonna add it all, because why not? I feel like that is much closer to a very sticky starter. It's still kind of closer to bread dough than anything, but a very sticky bread dough. I am going to cover this with plastic wrap, and we're going to leave it as soon as I get as much of it off of my hands as I possibly can. And we're going to leave it out at room temperature overnight. I think she says up to 12 hours. So we'll be back in the morning to finish this up. Our starter has been bubbling away overnight, and it looks good. The yeast is doing something, so hopefully we got about the right texture, and I'm sure we can make it up with flour if necessary. But I did some calculations last night, and this recipe is going to take like 6 hours or so. So we're going to try to do it in a little bit of a different order than what she says, or actually combine some steps. So right now we're going to caramelize some onions. I have my pan with the oil, neutral vegetable oil, over medium heat, trying to just heat up the pan, get the bottom covered. And this is a lot of onions. But these are all going to go in here, and they're going to cook for at least 30 to 40 minutes until they're caramelized, with a little bit of salt. So let's put these in here. And then she says go ahead and put the salt in, so I'm going to do that. A lot of onions, they cook down a lot. So got the salt, and now we just cook it for a long time until they're golden, and we're going to stir it as we need to occasionally, make sure it doesn't stick. I think she doesn't say this, but sometimes if they start to stick or it gets a little bit too high, you can put a little bit of water in it. It'll eventually cook off anyway if they start cooking a little bit too fast. There's a lot of onions here. I don't think we're going to cook too fast. But we're going to get started on the dough, because we don't need this until after the dough has been made, although we do have to cool this. Anyway, we're going to get started on the dough while we watch this. Probably won't show you this until it's done, but I'll let you know about how long it takes, okay? Be back in a minute. Now that our onions are cooking, because those are going to take a while, and this will take a little while too, we're going to get our bread dough started. We have the bread flour, more bread flour here, and some lukewarm water here. And we are going to mix this together with a wooden spoon or your hands. I don't really want to use my hands, so I'm going to use a wooden spoon until we just have a rough, wet dough. Hopefully it will be wet. I swear my flour tends to be drier than anybody else's, because I always need more water than they say. Now look, see, it's certainly not, it's a rough dough, but it's certainly not a wet dough. But I am going to call that okay for now. I think next we add our starter and some other wet-ish ingredients. So I'm gonna call that okay. And we're going to cover this and let it sit for 10 to 20 minutes just to rest. We're gonna cover it with plastic wrap. Rest for 10 to 20 minutes, and we'll be back. Our dough has been resting for about 20 minutes now, and we've put it on our mixer with the dough hook, and we're gonna add the rest of the ingredients, including our starter, which has been sitting out overnight. So I'm gonna start with some salt. There's a lot of salt in this, but I'm sure it's fine. I think it makes 2 loaves. I'm gonna add the sweet potatoes. These are roasted, pureed sweet potatoes. We've done this a couple times. I think we've made the sweet potatoes in their jackets, and then the citrus sweet potato butter is what it's called. So I'll try to link those here. I need some honey. I'm just gonna use this. I need a very small amount, but this will help me measure it and get it out of the measuring thing easier if it will come out of this. This is a Tupelo honey, which doesn't crystallize. I don't know if it ever does, but it's harder for it to crystallize. But the rest of my honey is crystallized, which will probably be fine. It tastes fine. It just is not liquid. So it's harder to get to, especially when it's in a squeezy bottle. So it won't come out. This came with a honeycomb in it, so that's why I'm trying to keep the honeycomb in the bottle while I pour the honey out. All right. Delicious. So I'm gonna put this in, and then it went in the sink at least. And now I'm gonna add our starter that we made last night. This is all bubbly, so it definitely was working. It definitely looks wetter today. Hopefully I can get, smells yeasty. Hopefully I can get it all out relatively. Very sticky. Okay. All right. So now we're gonna mix this for a really long time. She says about 15 to 20 minutes until it is smooth and silky and wraps around the dough hook. Probably won't show you the entire process, but we'll get it started. And she says to resist the urge to add more flour. It will come together. It's gonna be a sticky dough. It is very sticky. Now, I've started it at low, but I'm gonna turn it up to medium-high, as she says. In fact, first I'm gonna scrape a little bit of this down, because that will never, well, until it gets really dough bally stage, it won't ever get incorporated, so. All right. All right, I'm gonna turn it on, turn it up to medium-high. Our bread has been going for, I think, at least 20 minutes. I didn't really time it, but it took a long time. You really needed the reminder not to add flour. It's going to be a wet, sticky dough because it was very tempting. It really looked much more like a batter for the first at least 10 minutes. And then it kind of started to become a dough. And by 20 minutes, it looks like this. And I was going to just show you what it looks like. You see, after it rested for a little while, it went back to being more batter-like, but it did come back together around the dough hook. Now, I have a large bowl. She says at least 3 times as large as your dough. And she says to coat it with pan spray, Pam. I don't keep that in the house, so I have just spread it with a little bit of the same vegetable oil I am using on the onions. So, and then turn the dough out into the bowl. And hopefully it comes out all together, maybe. There we go. Yep, that's pretty good. And we're gonna let this rest for 20 minutes. Now, after 20 minutes, our onions need to be done. And they're not quite done yet. It's been more than 40 minutes. Mine don't have much color, but they're starting to get color on them. So I'm gonna wash my hands. We're gonna get our onions done and cooling, and we'll be back in 20 minutes for this. Our bread has been resting, our dough has been resting for about 20 minutes. Our onions took, we'll see this, about an hour, actually more like an hour and 15 minutes to get here. They started just getting mushy instead of getting too caramelized. We called it done. They're still pretty warm. I had them in the refrigerator and I have them sitting on an ice pack just to kind of cool them off a little bit faster. After this, I'll just leave them on the counter because what we're gonna do right now is divide this into quarters. We're gonna put a quarter of it in here, fold the dough over it, turn the dough over, and then let it rest for 20 minutes. And we're gonna do that 4 times. So, and after the 4th time, then we leave it resting for 2 hours and 40 minutes. So this is gonna take some time. I'm gonna show you this time, but probably not the other times because we've got another recipe we're working on at the same time and they're both very complicated. So we won't be able to film everything. But so I'm going to divide this into about quarters. Put this on top. Mine looks much paler than hers, but that's okay. And she says to fold each corner up over top. My bowl doesn't have corners, but I think I understand the goal here. It's still very sticky, so hopefully that's what it's supposed to be like. We'll see. I think it's a lot stickier than hers is, but and now we're supposed to turn it over. And now we let it rest for 20 minutes. That was a lot easier than I expected. So we're gonna let it rest for 20 minutes and we're gonna do that again. Rest for 20 minutes, do it again, rest for 20 minutes, do it again, and then it rests in a warm place. I'm probably gonna put it in my drawer. I've got the oven on low, so it'll be warm. I've got a warming drawer, bread proofing. Anyway, I don't have it on, but the oven's on. And we're gonna let it sit after that point for 2 hours and 40 minutes, as I said. So we'll see you in about, I don't know, 3 hours. We're done with the rising part of, well, the first rising part of this. And as you can see, it rose a lot. It's kind of overflowing my bowl. It is overflowing. It is sticking to, it's not too bad sticking to my plastic wrap. But we're going to turn this out onto this floured work surface. I said that and then it started sticking more. Great. And we're going to start shaping it. Still very sticky, very warm. May have overproofed, but you know, we'll see. I was a little concerned that there was only a small amount of yeast in this recipe, but well, it rose. So I'm gonna turn this out onto my work surface and hopefully it will come off the bowl. There we go. All right. Very sticky. Very huge. Okay. Now the goal is to divide it in half and to shape those halves into rounds. So I'm going to use my pastry cutter, getting it in a roughly round shape, cutting it in half. You can see those layers of onions coming out now. And I didn't flour enough, but I think that is roughly round. This is not the final shaping, so that one looks a lot better. Where I kind of folded some over. All right, so that's done. Now we let it rest again for 10 minutes. So I'm gonna clean my hands, let it rest for 10 minutes, and we'll be back. These have been resting for about 10 minutes, and now it is time to shape them, kind of. It's very weird. My bread guy has been reading the La Farm bread book by Lionel Vachonnet. He's a local baker. He's from France, if you couldn't tell. And he has not heard of any shaping lines. I'm not saying that it is unusual or that it doesn't exist, but I have never heard of this type of bread shaping before. So I don't know exactly what I'm doing. Following the directions, and we'll see how it turns out. For each of these, you need a parchment lined baking sheet dusted with flour. So I have both of those prepared. I did put a little bit of flour on top of here just because it was very sticky and I know I have to put my hands in it again. We're going to poke your finger down through the middle and lift this up and transfer it. Oh gracious. Transfer it. That's not happening. This is very sticky still. I'll shape it once it's on there. Okay, so now we have our not very round. I'm gonna move this over here so hopefully you can actually see me shape this. It's not very round anymore. Whatever. We're supposed to be making this look like a large flat donut with approximately a 3-inch hole. I guess that's so it doesn't get too tall in the middle. I really don't know. Really don't know why I'm doing this except for the instructions tell me to. And it's supposed to look like a large flat donut. My hole won't stay very well, but I think that's the best I'm going to be able to do with this. So we're going to switch it out and do it again, and maybe I'll do better this time. All right. Okay. I'm going to leave that be as it is. Pretty good. As good as I can do anyway. I'm going to wash my hands. I'm going to cover these with plastic wrap, and they're going to raise in a warm part of your kitchen. I'm going to put one in my warming drawer and one probably in the microwave just so it's out of the way for an hour and a half. Then we're going to bake them. As soon as I can, probably about half an hour before, you heat the oven up to 450 degrees and you set your racks up so that you can bake one in the lower third of the oven and one in the upper third of the oven, and then you switch them around in the middle. So I'm gonna get all that set up and we'll be back in an hour and a half. This has been rising, proofing for probably an hour and 15 minutes or so. Yeah, almost an hour and a half, but it looks well risen. So I'm going to very carefully take off the plastic wrap of this one. Back. Of course it tries to stick there at the end. There we go. I'm gonna get the other one. So I put them in two different places, but they both seem to have risen similarly, so that's good. And now my oven is still heating because I got stuck in my hammock for a little while. Not literally, but we're gonna put these in the oven, one in the lower third of the oven and one in the upper third of the oven. I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes. At 15 minutes, I'm going to switch them around. And then after 15 minutes, they should be done, and we'll let you know what they look like. We'll be back. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make sweet potato onion bread out of deep run roots. Now this recipe required a lot of time, a lot of steps. Some of it is hands off, but a lot of it is not. And we already had the pureed sweet potatoes ready to go, which is why we decided to make this recipe, because we had a bunch in the freezer. But even so, there's making the starter the night before, there's mixing up the dough and letting it sit, and mixing up the dough and letting it sit, and caramelizing the onions, which mine never caramelized quite right, which I'm not I don't know what the problem is with that, why it did, why they do, why they don't sometimes. I don't know. I decided it was fine. They were fine like they were. And you fold those in every 20 minutes and let it rise. And then it's a very wet dough. And I don't know if I did it right. And my bread guy, my camera guy, my sound guy, it's the same guy. He makes bread more than I do. He wasn't sure what was going on with it or what it should be like. I was heartened by seeing her bread in the pictures look a lot like mine, but ours did not turn out very well. I think it maybe overproofed at some point. It didn't get a good thick crackly crust like it seemed that it was supposed to. When I did rebake sort of the leftovers. We have a loaf still in the freezer, so I'll probably bake that again when we want to serve it. But we had leftovers and I baked those up a bit. And I enjoyed the flavor. It was good. I liked the onion in it. Kids, I thought it was bread. They would eat it. They didn't, whatever. They don't particularly like the sweet potato or the onion in it. So they ate a little bit, but not all. She does use this to make a sandwich, and I'm not sure how that happens because ours was not sturdy enough inside to hold a sandwich. It was pretty mushy, even though it seemed like it was done on the outside. So, was it worth the effort? Not so much for us. If you've maybe had this at her restaurant, and I don't think we ever did, but if you had this at her restaurant and know what it's supposed to be like, maybe it's something you want to make, but do recognize that it's going to take a lot of time. Not a lot of special ingredients, and you are able to, it does use the stand mixer to mix it, although we kind of had to hold it down while it was mixing it so it wouldn't walk all over the place and fall on the floor. So if you have all that, if you have the time and you think you might like it, go ahead and try it. We probably won't be making this again. And I'm guessing if we make the sandwich that she uses this on, we'll probably pick another sort of crusty country style bread to make that on. Maybe. Or we'll try it on the bread that we have in the freezer, and if that doesn't work, we'll try it some other way. Anyway, all that to say, didn't work for us, might work for you. Good luck. If you enjoyed watching me make this, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to come back and watch me make something else next week.